Hey guys, my name is Ryan Central and welcome back to another Anthem video. Today it's going to be a mix of a news roundup, lots of tweets to go over, lots of new information, but also I wanted to do some digging on some information surrounding Anthem's raids. This is for the most part the highest endgame content that any game will have. World of Warcraft, Destiny, both have raids. But up until now, we didn't really know a lot about Anthem's version of them or whether they would have them at all. The information that I found, I haven't really seen anywhere else, so I did want to add it in at the start of this video to let people know what we know so far about it. But then we'll be going over stuff like Ben Irvang's Reddit comments and of course finishing up in Mac Darrah's Twitter corner. Before we go over all of that though, a quick thank you. The channel is doing really well. We're getting a lot of traction from new viewers to do with, news updates, all that information. So thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all that subscribed. I'm doing my best to bring out the most up-to-date content as possible. So if you do want to keep up to date with Anthem, then do subscribe to this channel. Also, if you can, do like this video. It really does help out YouTubers. I know we say that a lot, but it does go a long way. So like and subscribe. I'd love it if you did. I'd really appreciate it. But again, let's get straight to today's video. Last week, we got a tweet from Mac Darrah saying that Anthem had matchmaking in its raids. Now this is the first time that we've really seen Bioware reference their version of raids. We know from developer interviews from E3 that there is going to be other endgame content, but they weren't ready to talk about it just yet. And I didn't know in this situation if Mac was referring to strongholds as being the raids, just sort of tying them all together, or whether there was more information on more endgame content. And there is, and that's what we wanted to go over. This came from the Anthem official Discord, and the light blue person is the Diesel. The light blue represents that he is a Bioware developer, and actually, strongholds and raids is his area. Strongholds are our version of dungeons. He then goes on to say that raids are a topic for another day. I'm also leading those too. There will be puzzle type mechanics. And he says that I'm super excited to share what we have planned for raids, but that's on the no talkie list at the moment. So a couple of things. It's specific that the fact that they do have raids planned, but they're not talking about it just yet. It's probably under NDA. This might be a little bit of a slip. But it's more confirmation that raids are a separate entity. They're not being mixed up by strongholds. There will be this high-end raid content that will still be for 4 people, I believe. There's not going to be for 6 people or more people like it is for World of Warcraft or Destiny. So that's just sort of worth adding in that situation. I think this is also big news, the fact that this endgame content is going to have its form of matchmaking. Destiny doesn't have it for its own raids and all sorts of content, to be honest, that isn't stuff like strikes, gambits, story missions, effectively anything else that isn't an instanced mission. It requires you to go outside of the game to find groups for open world missions and raids too. So I guess this is almost a response from Anthem to make sure that they don't do that, because that's one of Destiny's biggest complaints. Almost everything has optional matchmaking, but it does require groups at endgame content. So I really wanted to highlight this. I think this is really interesting information. It does look like there's going to be a lot of focus on Anthem's endgame content, but one thing that I do want to highlight in a future video is how the story is going to tie to that. It feels that the story, to an extent, is going to be Anthem's secret weapon. No doubt in a video, I will do a video going over what we know about the endgame content surrounding Anthem, so we'll be covering all of this more in a lot more detail. In the future, I do want to do a video going over everything that we know so far about endgame content, strongholds, these raids, Shaper Storms, that kind of jazz. But that's a topic for another day, but I did want to bring that to everybody's attention. Now also this week we had some pretty big information and changes to how players obtain javelins. Mac Darrah says, we originally were going to have javelins tied to missions, but this resulted in them getting unlocked too late. As a result, you will be able to choose a suit to unlock at different level thresholds. You can choose at each level gate which javelin you want, but you start with the ranger. I actually brought the question to Mac Darrah whether this was a change that was decided recently. He said yes. You can still choose the order of when you get said javelins, and it's every 5 levels or so. This is a pretty big change to how player progression works in Anthem. It seemed like they put a lot of effort into making sure that the story developed with you as a character, that you would get your javelins through missions and certain story elements. Getting Halux, who's the character that I'm showing on screen's Colossus, because he gets injured, seems to be a common idea of a story. Well, what will happen? You start off with a ranger, he gets injured, you get his javelin, and then you have areas surrounding the interceptor and the storm on how you would obtain them. But this change means that it's not really focused on the story. However, Ben Irvang on Reddit says that no missions are being removed. So they're keeping these big story elements, but it's not really going to tie to how you obtain your javelins. And I feel that this is because they don't want to keep people playing in the game for too long before they get what they want, and also it gives the player more control. They get to level and play whatever class they want at level 5, unless of course you just want to one-trick the ranger all the way through, that's also fine. The question that I do pose to you is, okay, you're at level 5, which Javelin do you unlock first? The Colossus, the Storm, or the Interceptor? I'm having a tough time, but I am more of a tanky player, so I am leaning towards Colossus. So do comment below in the video which Javelin you'd want to get first. Hashtag Colossus Club. Now let's go over some of the other questions that were asked on Reddit that were answered by Ben Irvine, who's one of the lead directors. He's the beautiful sultry voiceover, I believe, from the E3 gameplay with the Colossus. He's the one that's talking about all the aspects of the game, and has a lot to answer here. There's some pretty lengthy posts, which I won't read out completely, I don't want to waste your time too much. But this was a question regarding loot concerns and such, and Ben answers saying that we'd like the loot to define your builds and not just be about stats. He brings up games like Destiny, Division, Borderlands, where loot just has little meaning because it's all based on stats. It doesn't help you define your build at all. I think World of Warcraft has really suffered from that recently with the whole artifact power. It doesn't give you a certain way to play a hero, it just turns into arbitrary numbers. So it's interesting to see Ben Irvine say that that's a big focus of theirs. It's not just about stats, it's about how you play your hero and how you define what your character is going to do in terms of playstyle. Another Reddit post was about using a button to switch weapons. Ben Irvine says that double tap A, for example, is double jump for the Ranger and it allows you to boost higher in a Colossus. It's interesting that we're getting some information on controls, but one big question that was brought up was if there's going to be an estimate on when we're going to see the Interceptor character bio. As we highlighted in the last video, there is really no information there. Ben says that we hear you, we have a few things to work out, then we hope to share some information. I'm sorry, soon. Like a lot of developers, soon becomes a bit of a buzzword and doesn't really hold a lot of information, which is really unfortunate, but I'm sure we'll find out more information on the Interceptor fairly soon. And lastly, in this Reddit section, one of the questions was surrounding controls, the mouse and keyboard controllers. When are we going to find out what buttons, what keybinds, that kind of jazz? But Ben says that they're working on it at the moment. Both feel pretty solid, but they are working with the keyboard and mouse, mainly just tuning it so you don't need to have big mouse turns, having a massive table and a massive mouse mat to make sure that you could, turn around if you need to. So that's currently what they're working on now, which I thought was pretty interesting. But now we're going to be going over quite a lot to do with controls in Matt Darrah's Twitter Corner. Does PC have controller support? Matt Darrah says yes, but of course it can still use keyboard and mice. LCTR brings up the fact that because it's purely PvE at launch, players will feel more relaxed about choosing controller rather than going with that perceived keyboard and mouse advantage, which you see a lot in stuff like Overwatch. Any FPS game, keyboard and mice always tend to do better. But Matt Darrah's hope is that players do choose controller because it doesn't matter too much at the start. For console, it's not likely to see any form of keyboard and mice support, which if they want to balance for PvP down the line is probably a good idea to not include, otherwise things might get real messy. Now these tweets mostly are in chronological order, starts on the 4th of October and then goes up to the 8th. But let's go over them. Will Anthem be significantly more difficult? I think in comparison to how the gameplay is looked because it looks fairly easy. Or does the difficulty scale based on how many players are playing a mission? He says yes and yes. Does look like Anthem is going to be a really hard game, so do strap yourselves in for one hell of a ride, ladies and gentlemen. Are there different types of weapon for Anthem, like in Mass Effect Andromeda, bullets, energy beams, etc.? Or can you not say it this time? Matt Darrah says there are different types of weapons. This is a great question. Will there be any Iron Man themed gear or skins for the Javelins? Matt Darrah says we'll see what happens, but we would need Disney on board with that. Somebody says, in other words, no. And Max says probably no. However, we do know that EA do have connections to Disney with all of the Star Wars games that they've done in the past, so it's not a complete long shot to see an Iron Man skin in the game. I love the idea, I do hope to see it. We do know maybe that we'll be getting some Mass Effect skins down the line, but nothing quite just yet. Iron Man skin though, yes please. But just imagine like a Hulkbuster skin for the Colossus, a Vision skin for the Storm, how good would that be? I know it's a complete long shot, but man, that'd be really cool. Will there be an option for Arabic language in Anthem? Matt Darrah says unfortunately no, at least not for launch. Just to confirm, the game needs a connection and it requires dedicated servers, so you can't play it offline. And there should be full screen windowed options, as Dragon Age, Inquisition, and Mass Effect Andromeda both did. At least that's what Matt thinks. Some cutscenes will have bars too. This question comes in from Jonah, so we're able to pick the Javelins that we want, however I was wondering if you can only get loot for the Javelins you have. So for example, if you don't have a Storm, you won't get loot for it. Matt Darrah says yes. How will the Javelin switch system work? Will we just go into the inventory or switch, or do we need to go to a specific place? Max says it's done in the Forge, which is where you can also customize said Javelins. There is a Forge in the Strider and also in Fort Tarsis. Are there going to be ways to change the colour of your Javelin's armour? Max says, oh, definitely. And you can also change the helmets and masks. A really good question came out of Kick and Tail Gaming asking if there was any levels that were flying only. Max says you can't fly long enough to get through an entire level without landing to cool down. On the subject of the storm hovering, you can fly indefinitely, but MacDara does bring up the point that your jets don't cool when you're hovering as the storm. So every character needs to hit the ground at some point to recharge. A question on talents, are you able to level up the amount of time you are able to fly around within the game? And he says yes. So that's almost a confirmed talent for your freelancer, not necessarily a javelin, but your freelancer as a whole. And are you able to interact with downed allies as a Colossus whilst using the shield? He says yes. I did miss his question last week, and somebody did call me out on it, so I did want to add it into this episode. But that is everything up until the 8th of October. News is really ramping up, so apologies if this is a little bit of a longer video than usual, but I did want to cover quite a lot in one go, instead of it being in separate videos. But again, if you did like this video, like and subscribe, do let us know if you're going to unlock a Colossus, a Storm, or an Interceptor first, which one would you pick? And subscribe if you want to keep up to date with Anthem news and updates, and no doubt guides when the game actually comes out. Thanks for watching, hopefully see you soon, enjoy the rest of your week, take care.